Hello, so nice to see everybody again. My apologies for the long absence, but I have been dealing with other things in my life and that took precedence. But now it's time to review another movie, and this time we're looking at another comic book movie. Ah yes, I've been looking forward to this too. And the one we are picking apart today is none other than everyone's favorite Billy Zane movie, The Phantom. Well, maybe not everybody's favorite, but I will explain as to why I think it's better than what most people say it is.
Looking back, the early 1990s was very much an experimental phase in Hollywood for comic book-related films. With the advent of Superman and Batman, studios were contemplating what other properties could be brought to audiences. As evidenced in some of my previous videos, The Rocketeer and The Shadow were both movies adapted to the screen by previous comic book ventures from prior years. In the end, both underperformed and were pretty much shelved for any plans that might have been thought to come after it. Yet this wasn't a big enough hint to studios that their marketing was subpar.
Some people would probably say it was a bad idea from the start, and they should have quit while they were ahead. I, on the other hand, think that they had the right idea. They just didn't know how to advertise it correctly for the best appeal.
A couple years later, Paramount thought it was their turn to top Walt Disney Pictures and Universal Studios by producing their comic book action hero film. Guess what? It flopped. Big time. On a $45 million budget, it made less than $200,000 in its opening weekend. Ouch. So, what made it so non-blockbustery? Yeah, I made that up. Just by looking at the film, I believe there are some obvious pointers. The most blatant of standout issues would be...
Oh no!
Yeah, the suit being purple. How serious can one take such a hero in purple spandex? I mean, if anything, this proves that any superhero could get his or her movie adaptation, no matter how ridiculous they look. Heck, I know there have been rumors going around for a Marvel Squirrel Girl movie for some time now. Even a film appearance from DC's Red Tornado would be amazing.
That doesn't count.
Another problem would be casting. Did anyone truly think Billy Zane had star potential? I honestly think there was a possibility at the time, but apparently nobody else did. I know Zane has been relegated to the quality of direct-to-DVD films for the most part now, but this is his movie. Lastly, the biggest question people probably had on their mind was, who the hell's the Phantom? To those who asked that question, in their defense, I could see that happening. The Phantom, believe it or not, is in fact a graphic novel hero from what now people would consider the beginning of comics. Created by Lee Falk in 1936, the Phantom was literally the first masked action superhero to be put into comic books. That's right. Before the genesis of Superman, Batman, and even the Shadow, Falk's icon is the grandfather of all things comics and superheroes.
You could probably check this in your history books, kiddos. This is before Marvel or DC. It's Stone Age stuff.
Luckily, Falk also got the chance to see his own creation made into a film. He would unfortunately pass away a few years later. It's unfortunate that not many people would probably take this icon as seriously, though, after its theatrical release. The way the studio advertised this movie was just weird. Look at the poster's tagline. Slam evil! I don't know. I just don't see anyone really getting into saying that. It's like Paramount Studio executives just said, throw something up there that yells at the onlookers. You could say a lot of things that direct someone to do something, though. Watch, I'll do something. Cut the lawn. Join the army. Pick your nose. Wear purple spandex. The line said in the film, The Ghost Who Walks, is a better line that could catch someone's attention and at least intrigue them. As for reboots, there have been some notions that some people are interested, like Billy Zane, but as to whether it would happen, seems like a far shot. Since the character is so lost in the sauce, like other older figures, such as the Shadow, the marketing for a reboot would either have to be drastically different to appeal to today's mainstream, or would need to find a way to contact every single Phantom lover in the world so they could make a profit. Although the second one I highly doubt. But if there were any time to reboot a film and put as much into it as possible, Now would be the time. With comic book movies coming out every which way, and with enthusiasts' passions being so high, something should be done.
In all honesty, I actually would be astounded if anything came about. I mean, the name suits its existence very well. But that doesn't mean its one and only outing shouldn't be acknowledged either.
Overall plot and writing. For those who came in late, which is exactly how the film starts off, after being attacked by a group of pirates, not in any way related to Jack Sparrow, the young son of a ship's captain is stranded on an island where the natives empowered him to fight crime and promote justice when he became older. Switch to present day, where some henchmen are searching for a special artifact known as the Skulls of Tuganda. Behind this operation is Xander Drax, played by Treat Williams, a kingpin looking to cause chaos and destruction once he has all three skulls. Preparing to stand in the way of that life goal is the Phantom, his alias being Kit Walker, played by Billy Zane, the descendant of the stranded captain's son, who would be later played by Patrick McGoohan. Living in the jungle and relying on the natives, Walker realizes that the root of his problems lies back in the United States. Little does he know, on his way back, he would end up running into an old lover by the name of Diana Palmer, played by Christy Swanson. She too is investigating Drax after she learns the newspaper her uncle owns, played by Bill Smitrovich, turned up some dirt on the man. This dirt that was dug up was the tattoo mark of the pirates that had ambushed the first-generation Phantom, led by the head pirate Kabai Seng, played by Kari Hirayuki Tagawa.
Well, since it's so trendy in the rest of the media today, fake news!
Making this adaptation a reality was writer Jeffrey Boehm. For the overall experience, Boehm made it a light, fluff adventure. It's nothing that needs to be displayed with dramatic heft. In some ways, people would call this cliché, with the whole gig of having the villain wanting a supernatural plot device that would help them become the ultimate ruler after causing a ton of destruction. Has this been done before? Undoubtedly. As a matter of fact, the other two movies mentioned before follow the same basic formula to some degree. On the other hand, there are some really baffling moments. The father of Kit Walker appears and speaks to him from time to time, but only Walker can see him. So it must be in his psyche? It's kind of an odd trait. After all, it does kind of make Walker look a bit loony.
Tell him to step on it.
Can you go any faster?
You talking to me now?
Yes, can you pick it up?
Sure. Hold on to your hat.
He also has the ability to communicate with other animals, like his horse Hero, his dog Devil, and some others. In some ways, that sounds a bit like George of the Jungle, but slightly more educated. You know, he did go to college and all, but he is also a giant grape-suit man. But no explanations are ever given for any of these things. It's cool, and makes no logical sense. However, there are several things to savor while watching this movie that make these details rather unimportant. It really doesn't make sense as to why Boehm's script fell flat with so many people. Although this was his last screenwriting credit, Boehm helped write a number of hard hitters earlier before that, with films like The Dead Zone, Lethal Weapons 1 through 3, The Lost Boys, and most critically, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The director attached to this production was an appropriate choice too. Australian man Simon Windsor was in charge of heading this film. Windsor would later go on to control action and family-friendly genre movies. Before The Phantom, Windsor had directed other works like Quigley Down Under, Free Willy, and Operation Dumbo Drop. The Phantom was really the last big action film for Windsor that got released theatrically. He did, however, shortly after direct 4 home video releases of The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, starring Sean Patrick Flannery.
He's actually one of those directors who should be given more mainstream movie projects. I mean, look at Joe Johnston from The Rocketeer. Entertaining film, competent director.
Actors and characters. When most people hear the name Billy Zane, very few would think leading man or action hero potential. Many people remember him for playing supporting characters like Match in Back to the Future, Steve in Critters, Mr. Fabian in Tombstone, or another Leonardo DiCaprio film, Titanic, as Cal. Yet this film proves that Billy Zane could be a star in a big adventure film, portraying a popular icon. Zane's performance as the Phantom and alter ego are nothing short of entertaining. The Phantom is one of those characters who has the ability to be calm in almost every situation he's in. Whether he ends up somewhere by accident or something doesn't go as planned, he manages to keep his cool and think on his feet. He's very confident in what he has to do and how he's going to do it.
All right, gentlemen, nobody...
Ladies, kindly pardon my error.
Oddly enough, his everyday man persona as Kit Walker is less of that. It's not that he's clueless, but more out of touch with everything because he spends so much time in the jungle, as Nature Boy. He forgets what currencies to use and can't exactly function as smoothly when around his old love interest. In some ways, it feels similar to that of the contrast of Superman to Clark Kent.
Oh yeah, I've seen something like that before.
You have?
Yes, but I don't think it was silver, I think it was green.
Green. Jade, perhaps. I mean, wow, where did you see it?
Although the difference is that Kent was intentionally clumsy, while Walker was more Mr. Forgetful at times.
Christy Swanson as Diana Palmer, although tends to get herself captured a couple times, does manage to show off some female strength. Authoritative in her own way, Swanson makes Palmer one of those individuals who isn't afraid to say what they think, even if that means trouble as a result. Her chemistry with Kit is average, most of the time, because of their strained relationship history. When it's her and the Phantom, though, a number of good quips come about. This mainly occurs when Catherine Zeta-Jones comes into the picture as Sala, a pilot hired by Drax. The reason being would be that they both find the Phantom alluring in some way.
This is a rescue.
Thanks. You've done a good job. I can take it from here.
She's not changed a bit.
As to how they find an action hero in purple spandex attractive, that's a mystery way beyond my education level. Or the script just says so.
Both Swanson and Jones would later fade from the spotlight and take up less projects. Swanson was in Joss Whedon's first attempted version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 1992, and would later take a role in Adam Sandler's Big Daddy. Jones would later play in films like The Mask of Zorro, Chicago, and Ocean's 12. For antagonists, it's hard to see anyone else playing Xander Drax other than Treat Williams. As an actor, Williams has performed in all kinds of film genres with varying role magnitudes. One year, he's uncredited as a rebel soldier in Star Wars Episode V, The Empire Strikes Back, and the next year he's showing off his dramatic chops in a highly regarded crime film, Prince of the City, as the main lead. He's also had his fair share in lower-end guilty pleasure movies like Dead Heat and Deep Rising. He's even known on the small screen for shows like Everwood and Chicago Fire. The performance that Williams puts on here is very outlandish and over the top. From what it looks like, Williams is interpreting the character of Xander Drax to be a villain who thinks he's larger than life, when he really isn't.
He's perhaps too goofy for his own good, but not enough to be annoying.
What really makes Drax the weakest character as a formidable presence is possibly due to the type of voice Williams has. It's not always true, but more often than not, villains will have much more bass in their vocal cords.
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
Get off your soapbox, Thatch. You've read Darwin. It's called natural selection. We're just helping it along.
Happy Halloween, ladies. Nuns. No sense of humor. I'll get you next time, Gadget. Next time.
What do you say, Cowboy Sing? The girl for the skull, and I'm out of your hair.
Oh, hell no!
Treat Williams just doesn't sound menacing. To his credit, this makes his translation that much more fitting to the overall tone of the script. Treat Williams played it up like no human villain monster probably ever has, especially this part.
It's unbelievable. This is as good as it gets. It's unbelievable.
Cary Tagawa as the leader of the Seng Brotherhood is probably not as present as some would probably hope, but it's still great to have him on board too. Being that he's best known for playing antagonists in other guilty pleasure films like Showdown in Little Tokyo and Mortal Kombat, this only solidifies how underappreciated this actor is. In this feature, Tagawa is not as eccentric, but does have moments of sarcasm that are comical to hear. He also gets to partake in some entertaining action sequences with the Phantom. That's always a joy to watch. If anything, the roles feel a bit mismatched. Tagawa should have ended up being the larger antagonist for two reasons. The first being that his voice is deeper by comparison to Tree Williams. The second being that his character shared a deeper history with the Phantom.
However, this is far from being something to bash the whole movie for.
As of late, Tagawa has been acting in other productions like The Man in the High Castle, and voiced Hashi in Kubo and the Two Strings.
When was the last time we had visitors here below the ocean surface, deep in the bowels of this uncharted volcanic island? Never. Congratulations.
The supporting characters, played by Bill Smitrovich, Patrick McGowan, and even James Remar, are decent for the roles they were assigned. Smitrovich, as the uncle of Diana Palmer, has a personality very similar to that of his niece, not afraid to stand toe-to-toe with his opponent.
Why go after me? I'm just a private citizen.
You own companies that regulate public utilities. You control the trade unions. You influence interest rates and stock prices. And you have personal and business involvements with the Zephyro crime family.
Patrick McGowan, as the father of Kit Walker, is adequate in the role. He manages from time to time to add some humor to some of the conversations he has with Kit.
Maybe I can get that gun belt back for you.
If you haven't lost them already.
Don't worry, I'll catch him. I have to. There's a woman involved.
Saints be praised. It's about time.
James Remar, as the top henchman who works for Drax, isn't bad in his showing, and he too shares a small history with the Phantom.
Who was that guy?
Somebody I already killed.
What?
You heard me. I killed him years ago.
Well, guess what? He's back.
At least he's behind us.
Smitrovich's most recent appearance in mainstream films were Ted, The November Man, and Ted 2. McGowan unfortunately passed in 2009, but was in a number of big movies like Escape from Alcatraz, Scanners, Braveheart, A Time to Kill, and voiced a minor character in Treasure Planet, as his final credit. James Remar, on the other hand, has been in more movies, playing all kinds of supporting roles, in movies like 48 Hours, Judge Dredd, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Yeah, we tend to forget that one. Too Fast, Too Furious, Blade Trinity, Transformers Dark of the Moon, and oddly enough, an indie film called All Superheroes Must Die.
Looking at the cast, I really do think, though, that this makes a little more sense as to why the movie never made back its budget. But I also think that's as good as the cast was going to get. Everyone worked well in the position they were given.
Action and cinematography. As mentioned before, director Simon Windsor has had experience in the action genre prior to this feature. With that understood, it can be safely said that the action scenes that take place throughout the running time are quite lively. Within the feature, several chases and physical movements surface. Very little, if any, of these scenes involve CGI, which in turn means most of it was practical effects. And that always makes the events more realistic when they are professionally done. The physical scenes involve different types of motions involving either hand-to-hand combat or sword fights. Either or, both are fun watching play out. Going back to some of the initial criticisms people give this film, yes, a person in a rather vibrant purple spandex suit really doesn't fit in any setting. In actuality, it can make someone a giant target. Perhaps the costume design crew could have gone for a darker shade, without abandoning the original look. Yeah, but not that tactical stuff I'm talking about like the RoboCop remake did.
And as much as I know that's true, it still doesn't matter because the look is nothing like any other character.
For what was shot, David Burr ended up coordinating the cinematography. For much of this work, the shots are well established and contain a wide variety of settings that the viewer will admire. Keep in mind, the majority of Earthbound superhero films have usually taken place in the city, in which there are shots of New York here as well, most likely matte paintings, but that's treated more like a temporary tourist rest stop. A lot of the action in this movie take place in the lush green jungle terrain, or in another uncommon setting. Besides, with a 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio, the range of these cameras caught look great. The best scene that covers a lot of the area belongs to the plane escape chase. There's just a lot of scenery to take in. Since The Phantom, Burr has had consistent work, but nothing that a lot of mainstream audiences would know of. The two entries in his filmography that might ring any bells were The Paperback Hero, before Hugh Jackman was Mr. Logan 9 times in a row, and George of the Jungle 2.
Didn't think I'd make that reference again. No matter, though. The action captures the attention, and the backdrop behind those scenes are nothing to complain about.
Soundtrack and film score. If at this point the idea of taking this character seriously doesn't make any sense, the music behind should say at least something. Composed by David Newman, the film score to this piece is by far, and should be, the most convincing element. Music within this picture is all organic and functions mostly like a proper superhero adventure score. Like all superhero scores should be constructed, Newman rightfully gives the Phantom a motif that suits him well, pardon the pun.
Really, dude?
Tribal drums in the background beat in rhythmic fashion to stir urgency, while horns sound to announce the Phantom's arrival. Sometimes even a pan flute is used to ride home the jungle heritage that Kit Walker ended up inheriting. The theme itself is really catchy and is repeated as required. The tracks in between that do not involve the Phantom are well put together too. The love theme for Diana and Kit Walker is similar, but also utilizes a solo piano to evoke tenderness between the two. The cues that coincide with the action scenes also match what happens in a scene and help elevate the experience. Even Drax has a theme, which should have been developed a little more, but it is its own motif. That's perhaps the only flaw, but it's minuscule. Here are some samples. Originally, when released, the film score contained roughly 45 minutes of material. However, La La Land Records released an expanded score which now exceeds an hour, and that's awesome. Highly recommended for those who love superhero music. David Newman really outdid himself anyway. If the name does not sound familiar, Newman was also the composer to films like The Brave Little Toaster, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, The Mighty Ducks, The Nutty Professor, Anastasia, Galaxy Quest, and Ice Age. Oh, and his first credit? That was Tim Burton's original Frankenweenie.
What surprises me is that Mr. Newman hasn't done any other superhero scores. Wait a second. There was Frank Miller's The Spirit. Nah, that doesn't count.
Overall impression. Was it a flub or a job well done? In a time where comic book adaptations are all the rage in Hollywood filmmaking, hardly any of them are made of old generation superheroes. The Shadow and the Phantom are two of the oldest, and both have received decent adaptations that went under the radar. Lee Falk should be proud of the crew to this film. Some character choices might be jarring, like costume design or role priorities, but the main characters carry the needed weight to make this jungle adventure romp nimble enough to keep the attention of any viewer. The camera work is fantastic. The music is impressive for an early superhero score, and the actors play their parts accordingly.
It may be unrealistic in some places, but it's definitely worth the time to sit down and enjoy.
Well, I stand for the new order of things. Modern and up-to-date. Just the man to carry our cause into the 20th century.
Silence! You have no bargaining power with me.